Story 1. 12 years ago, we had twin boys. We knew one would be Thomas after my wife's uncle, but struggled to name the second. For about 28 hours, he was baby B, then we finally settled on Jeremiah. 2 days later, we introduced him to our pastor, and he said, "Oh, cute. Tom and Jerry." I looked at my wife, and we were both thinking, oh, we did not just do that. But we left. Back then, we were slightly embarrassed about it. It took us a few years to really embrace it. We actually never thought to dress them up as cats and mice for Halloween, but that would be awesome if we did. Also, they might be living up to their names. Whenever one is engrossed in something, the other will raise hell with them. It's like they both have to be the center of each other's attention. That pastor is a complete troll. I got a good chuckle from his joke. Story 2. I used to work in tech support with a guy whose name was Gandalf. In the 1970s, when he was born, Tolkien wasn't even a nerdy thing. It was a hippie thing. His parents were big hippies and loved the books, so they named him Gandalf. His sister's middle name is Galadriel. He said that at first, people rarely recognized the name. It was a weird name, sure, but few people knew he was named after a fictional wizard. Until the movies came out. He hates Peter Jackson. Story 3. Yeah, so this is a throwaway, and my son's first and last names are too. It's the middle name that's the mess up. I wanted something simple, strong, and easy to remember. Robert Smith. Straight to the point. When the nurse or whoever she was came to my bed in the hospital to record the name, that's what I told her. She asked what the middle name was, and I told her, no middle name. A couple of weeks later, when the record of birth arrived, it read, Robert, no middle name, Smith. What the hell, humans? How do we even survive? Story 4. My first name is just a letter. It gets better. I have an identical twin brother, and his first name is also a letter. We each have normal middle names, but letters as first names. It's because my dad thought it looked elegant, and not typical letters. I'm talking about 3 of the last letters. Thanks, Dad. Filling out any sort of paperwork for everything is troublesome. I know I can change my name, but I don't want to go through that hassle when I'm already used to the odd name I was given. My dad doesn't regret it, but my mom wishes he would have waited until after the epidural wore off from her C-section to name us. My mom is 5 foot flat and 95 pounds. She's an emergency room physician, and when the day arrived for my twin and I to be born, she didn't have any contractions. Typically, twins aren't carried full term, but here we were 9 months later in full term. The obstetrician decided that a cesarean would be the safest choice, considering my mother was 40 at the time. The anesthesiologist administered the epidural, but it was too large a dose for my mom, seeing as she's such a tiny person. When my mom was having a hard time breathing, she told the anesthesiologist that she knew the area above the diaphragm had been numbed and started to panic because she couldn't breathe, and so the anesthesiologist administered a dose of Valium, so my mom became unconscious. When she woke, she realized for the first time that my dad was definitely married. Last 3 letters? I hope this dude's name is not Y, because when someone asks for his name, he'd say Y, and people might think he's being a snob. Story 5. My ex and I had a great marriage, until it fell apart 14 years later. Up to that point, the worst thing we ever fought about was baby names and paint colors. She wanted her first to be Zebulon Zechariah. Not even kidding. We fought and fought about it. She was dead serious, and I was completely baffled as to how she thought that was a good idea. I finally talked her into a more sane first name, conceded Zachary as a middle name. The second child she wanted was D'Artagnan. Little Dart, she would say. Oh, hell no. We fought over this one while she was in labor on the way to the hospital. She wasn't giving up. I won that one too, with something not common, but sane at least. Third child, she was back on the D'Artagnan train. I fought for 9 solid months. Thank God that one was a girl. Story 6. My wife is fortunately somewhat more sensible than me and vetoed all of my wacky name choices, so I do not have a Shalimar, a River, Temperance, Winifred, or a Ford. I'm still a bit sore about Winifred and River, but I do concede that she had a point with the rest in hindsight. I was allowed more leeway with the middle names, and my eldest is the middle name Neris, as in Major Kira, which would be fine except that it's spelled exactly the same as a Welsh name, which is pronounced Neris, which is entirely not what I was going for. My son's middle name is Zed, so when anyone asks him what the Z in his name stands for, he can say Zed, which I thought at the time was really cool. Then, sometime thereafter, I came to the conclusion that it was stupid. Now, I don't know what I think. He seems to like it, though. Oh, and my daughter, whose middle name is Storm, is afraid of thunder and lightning. Story 7. I think my mother regrets my name. She wanted to name me Sebastian, but my grandmother said she'll call me My mother caved and named me Joshua. I heard this story all my life, so when I had my first son, we named him Sebastian. I've never seen my mother so happy. My grandmother calls my son by his middle name. Props to this dude for being such a cool son. But hey, you should have named his son Sebastian just despite his mean grams. Story 8. I named my oldest daughter Darion because my husband then, we were young and very stupid, wanted to call the baby Damien. And this was my compromise, because I wasn't naming a child after the demon child in The Omen. Also, there was a female DJ on the radio at the time called Darion, so I thought it would work. Well, it turns out that Darion is most often a boy's name and very often a black name. My daughter is in her 20s now, and she has never let me live it down. Everywhere she goes, people expect a black man. She's a nerdy, short, white girl. I had good intentions. Story 9. Well, my mother doesn't regret naming me Shaw. It doesn't seem so bad because it's a fair family name, but as my first name, it causes great confusion. For example, if I introduce myself to someone, I have to clarify that my name isn't actually Sean, or Sure. Then, of course, the conversation goes as follows. Yeah, it's spelled S-H-A-W. And they say, "Are you sure?" Which sounds exactly like, "Are you Shaw?" in my regional accent. A-holes. Story 10. My parents named me after my grandpa, who died before I was born. My sister thinks showing me pictures of his grave is funny. It gave me nightmares when I was younger, but now I'm cool with it. Plus, it gives me great one-liners when Dad yells at me. Dad, you disrespectful little piece of crap. Me, how dare you talk to your father like that? My one-liners and comebacks suck sometimes. Whoever told this dude his comeback stinks is lame. That was hilarious. Story 11. To a degree, I regret the names of both of my kids. My wife and I picked out the name Aiden long before the current Aiden, etc. craze. After my son was born, we found out it was one of the most popular names of the year. We probably would have picked something else just to keep him from having the same name as 4 other kids in any given gathering. For my daughter, we picked the name Arya long before we even knew there would ever be a Game of Thrones show, but that's not why I regret her name now. No, that would be a result of her middle name, Naomi. There's nothing wrong with that on its own until you see her name written out with her middle initial, especially in all caps. Arya N. Damn. Story 12. I don't have children myself, but I would have given anything to have not been named after my father. I love my dad and I think he's a great guy, but I actually didn't really grow up around him. My parents separated when I was 10 and my mom resented my father. Because of this, she began redirecting a lot of the anger she held for him toward me. I would get grounded for no apparent reason at all, and when I would tell her that it didn't make any sense, I would get a response like, "All right, Steve, whatever you say, Steve." I was young, but I began picking up on the sarcasm and realized she was thinking of my father anytime I disagreed with her. Through the years, that evolved into her just calling me Dad. Yes, my own mother would call me Dad in fights and arguments. She hated the man so much that she couldn't separate me from him. I'm not saying she literally thought I was him, but she made damn sure to make sure I felt guilty for things I would never understand. This would swing from things like, "Your father would say that," to, "Whatever you say, Dad. I'm just a stupid woman, you piece of crap." She also liked to say, "Yes, master," over and over again, as if I were commanding her to do something when most of the time I just wanted to go outside and skate with my friends. To this day, I struggle with how I feel about my mom. Story 13. I get that with my name Crystal as well. It used to bother me so much in school when teachers would just automatically write Crystal. Nowadays, when I tell people who are writing or typing my name for something, I automatically spell it and my last name. People constantly leave a letter out of my last name as well, for them. When I got older and realized that the spelling of my name isn't completely unheard of, it just annoys me that much more when people look at me like I'm the one misspelling it. I've been spelling my name for around 27 years, and I'm pretty damn sure I'm right. Funny story about how my name ended up spelling that way. When my mom was filling out the birth certificate stuff, she was still so out of it that she began writing my brother's name, Charles. She stopped at the CH and thought, whatever, and just finished the name. Story 14. Oh, and consider your initials carefully. My surname begins with a W. My brother had a daughter and named her Jennifer Elizabeth. Pretty vanilla, huh? They got a lot of blankets and cups with J-E-W embroidered and engraved in each piece. We aren't Jewish. Story 15. My wife regrets my kid's initials, FCK, but I think his pickup line choices could be hilarious. My initials are FCK. All I need is you. Once this dude's kid hits the legal age, he's going to be ready to drop this solid pickup line in the world. It's a surefire way for him to score some massive points. And if you're into more clever pickup lines, why not hit that like button and subscribe to my channel? I've got a ton more lined up just for you. Story 16. My mother and stepfather picked out and agreed upon a name for my little sister while my mom was pregnant. Her middle name was supposed to be Kate. Stepman never said anything about it. He liked it and was fine with it. A baby gets born and a birth certificate is being written out. Mom's exhausted, so she lets the baby's dad deal with it. A few weeks later, Mom takes a look at the new social security card and birth certificate and flips out because the middle name in all this paperwork is Leigh, even though that name had never come up in discussion. She didn't even know until she stumbled across it by accident, quite a bit too late. I have no idea what he was thinking, but he used to pull stunts like that all the time. He'd do something completely different from what was discussed and then say, "Well, I didn't think you'd mind." He was pretty awful and their relationship was so screwed up. Sometimes I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did. But then I remember that my mom was just as messed up as he was. They split up about 3 years after my sister was born, maybe a little less than that. Story 17. My female cousin was supposed to be named Omnia. We're Egyptian, it sounds much better in Arabic. Before delivering the girl, the only time the name of the girl was ever discussed was between my aunt and my other aunts. I don't think my uncle, the father of the girl, knew about the agreed name because he was always working. I think the consensus was that he would be okay with any name, so my aunt didn't bother telling him she was planning on naming my cousin Omnia until after she delivered her. It comes time to write out her name and my aunt tells my uncle the name. She's exhausted, so uncle goes to get the name recorded. On his way there, he forgot the bloody name and instead wrote down Hind. Of course, when my aunt was recovering a few days later and checked the certificate, she flipped out and nearly divorced my uncle. But the good news is that my other aunt, who suggested the name, took advantage of the situation and named her own daughter Omnia. Now I have two cousins named Omnia and Hind. Story 18. My parents are hippies who grew up in the 1970s. Thankfully, I got away with a reasonable name, Jem. I've seen Jem in the holograms. My two younger brothers are named Conan and Torald. Our parents have never expressed regret over any of our names, though. I'm a guy and my parents were inspired by Harper Lee when naming me. They were really hoping for a girl and their first choices for names were Kitty or Jem. My dad said they didn't think of any boy names until after I was born, and they remembered the character To Kill a Mockingbird and changed Jem to Jem. Voila. Story 19. Not me, but my parents named me Will Smith. I used to think it was a coincidence until I looked up the date The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air started and it was before I was born. My brother is called James Smith. This is LL Cool J's real name. My parents are both white and middle class, but I think that they're secret rap fans. I'm thinking of changing genres and naming my firstborn Arrow. I'm pretty sure Tupac Smith would have come up next if this dude had another sibling. Story 20. Naming your kids is tough. First, you have to run it through the people you hate filter. We hate a lot of people. Second, you want to be hip, but not too hip. The world can do without another Ainsley. Rose is an up-and-comer too. Third, you have to run it through the playground filter. Asher, a-hole. Plus, I'm a teacher. There are a lot of names I can't use because Oscar. I remember Oscar. Man, I can't name a kid Oscar. So we settle on William and Jillian. Willie and Jilly. Wait, no way, man. How weird is this? Kids' names that rhyme? We seriously didn't figure this out until a random person was all, how precious. These are my kids. Papa Bear is getting disturbed. Story 21. I once knew a guy in high school whose last name was Sweat. The poor guy's parents made his first name Richard. That's right. His nickname is... Well, you know what I mean. Story 22. I went to a summer camp with a guy called Raymond. Seriously. First name Raymond, second name Raymond. Naturally, we gave him hell for it. Me. So were your parents hammered or something? R2. I was named after a very well-respected relative, actually. Me. So were his parents hammered? He didn't talk to me much after that. Story 23. Not a parent and sort of the opposite here. My brother and his then-fiancé were about to have a kid, and they argued about the name all the way to the delivery room. I wasn't around when they had to do the paperwork for the baby's name, and he was upset when she named their son Logan. I mentioned it to him that it's not a terrible name. After all, it's Wolverine's name. About a week or so later, I hear him on the phone with a friend talking about how he didn't like the name until he realizes that his kid is named after Wolverine. If I were this dude's brother, I'd give him a friendly smack and say, "Man, didn't I just lay out the plot for you? Your kid's basically the next Wolverine origin story." Story 24. My wife and I have a daughter that we named Jordan. I'm fine with that. My wife is a very independent woman and Jordan is kind of a strong name for a girl. Now we're thinking about having another kid. And if it's a boy, she wants to name him Michael. Jordan and Michael, Michael and Jordan. I'm 6'7", she's 6'3", and both are very white. She somehow thinks it won't be weird if our most likely tall children are named freaking Michael and Jordan. I don't want to be answering questions or listening to jokes about their names for the next 20 years, though. Story 25. I have a friend from high school who has 4 kids. Oldest is Landon, perfectly normal, if very popular. The second is Caden, getting more odd but still in the realm of normal. The third and only girl is Kensley. Now you're just making things up. And she's due any day with her 4th, Brogan. I really hope they're done since the names are getting progressively worse. My cousin also just had a baby, and I have no idea how to pronounce her name. Ellie. The best guess is like Ellie, but no one can confirm this. Story 26. I'm not a parent myself, but I tried to warn my friend that everyone was going to be naming their kid Jacob because of the damn Twilight movie, and she was cursing her kid for years for sharing classes with other people of the same name. Her and I both have very common names for our age groups, and she agreed that it was really annoying, and she also hates those Twilight movies, but she stuck to Jacob nonetheless. Sure enough, Jacob was the #1 most common name for the year he was born. Poor baby Jacob. Poor all the baby Jacobs. Don't name your baby Jacob. Story 27. I had a friend we would call Elby. I assumed that was her name. I worked for a Sprint and was setting her up with a cell phone, and when I saw her ID, Elby was actually the initials for LB. Her first name was Laughing Bear. She told me that both her parents were hippies, which I also found hard to believe since she had a very Hispanic last name. I honestly didn't think Laughing Bear is a bohemian-sounding name. It sounds more like a Native American name, but hey, that's just me. Story 28. I had to fight like hell for my wife's entire 3rd pregnancy before she let me name our son Milton. Among other things, my wife recommended that I impregnate another woman if I wanted to name someone Milton so badly. During his first few days when we were signing him up for doctor appointments and other stuff, we were asked if he was named for a grandfather or something. Nope, I just like the name. Of course, everyone now agrees that Milton is the perfect name for the little dude and he's the superstar of every room he toddles into. He's got a memorable name to go along with the cuteness power of 1,000 cute supernovas. Whatever, haters, Milton is an awesome name. Story 29. Once again, not a parent, but I didn't have a name until I was about 3 months old because my parents couldn't agree on a name. My dad wanted me to be Katherine after his mother. My mom wanted Jody because she felt like the name. She never named her baby doll Katherine when she was little. My brother, who was 3, wanted Coleman because my aunt had just had a son named Coleman. My mother finally relented when the hospital started getting mad, so I was named Katherine Nicole. Nicole, so it would be similar to Coleman. Why the added H, I still haven't gotten an answer to, but on the stipulation that I would go by my initials, KC. My mom says we still don't know what my real name is. Story 30. I worked with a lady for about 7 years. She was in her 50s, from Puerto Rico, and named Elba. Awesome lady. The last trip she took to PR while I was still there, she came back a bit defeated. Her mother had finally found her long-lost original birth certificate. On it was a real name, Elva. Her own mother had been calling her by the wrong name for more than 50 years. Okay, yes, B and V phonetically can be interchangeable for some Spanish speakers, but it still stinks that her mom messed up writing and teaching her name for more than 50 years. Story 31. I knew a girl whose legal first name was I.O. The backstory is that her mom was a dancer in the early 1970s and her dad was a computer programmer. I/O is the name her dad put in the birth record, but the Canadian government would not allow the slash, so it became I.O. For those not in the know, I.O. stands for input/output. In the early 1970s, there were not many computer-savvy people around who would have understood the joke her dad played on her and her mom. We all called her Gabby, and when she turned 18, the first thing she did was change her legal name to Gabby. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy. Parents, what's the funniest reason you've been called into school to get your kid? Story 5 will leave you in stitches. See you on that video.